I'm going to start by handing over to you, Bronwyn Williams. I'm going to start your countdown in 2 seconds. I don't even know if you're going to need a clicker.
I don't think I'm going to need a clicker.
Timed.
Yes, I listened to the instructions.
Are you ready?
Yeah, do I need a microphone there? Or are we good?
There you go.
Okay, so across the world, people believe that banks and big businesses are responsible for the 2008 financial crisis. This has led to a huge wave of distrust in financial institutions. In fact, trust in financial institutions is down to just 26%. That means it's halved since 2008. And this distrust has opened up opportunities for non-financial institutions to get into the financial space. Specifically, brands that own some sort of relationship with their customers, that is retailers, for example, and other sort of network-based businesses. Starbucks, for example, has its payments app. 15% of the company's turnover goes through that app, and it's been so successful that the CEO is redefining his role to focus on the future of the business in the financial space. Whopper Coin came out of Burger King. They've introduced their own digital cryptocurrency, which can be traded peer-to-peer outside of the Burger King network. But these sort of brands are not the real threat to financial services industry. Rather, it's social networks. These are the networks that own our attention, our trust, and our time. And they've started to realize the value of this asset that they possess. Alibaba's Alipay app now has $100 billion in assets. Facebook and Snapchat have both made regulatory moves to move into the banking space. Facebook's applied for banking licenses in both Ireland and the US, and Snapchat is making very similar moves. But now, social networks might even be late to their own party. We're seeing third-party banking bots that enable real-time transactions and link into your bank account to facilitate those transactions popping up all over the place. These sort of apps that can even offer financial advice offer a real threat to financial advisors and to physical bank branches. Examples include Kudi, which came out of Nigeria. That was actually the first bank bot to come out of Africa. And Absa's got its own chat banking service, which is quite similar. And then there's MasterCard's MyKai, which you saw on the previous slide. Now, there are other social networks that have been built specifically around finance and peer-to-peer transactions. Tilt, for example, is a social finance network targeted at Generation Z. It's the fastest growing app in campuses in the US, and it facilitates bill splitting and saving up for shared purchases. Other peer-to-peer networks, of course, include your Bitcoins and your cryptocurrencies, which facilitate secure real-time transactions between their community members. And then you get into the social lending and the crowdfunding models. Barclays-backed Rainfin here in South Africa loans around R1 million a day to small and medium-sized enterprises. We've even seen networks in India that facilitate peer-to-peer financing of mortgages for home loans. And then there's one of my favorites. 10 is a peer-to-peer lending or peer-to-peer payments app that facilitates tithes and offerings in Nigerian churches to cut down on corruption in churches, ironically enough. Now, of course, in South Africa, we're well ahead of the social finance trend. Stokvels accommodate anywhere between 25 billion to 50 billion, depending on the people you speak to, in assets. And now younger consumers are using stokvels not just for saving up for Christmas bonuses and for groceries, they're actually using them to invest seriously. Now, Sepal Malloy has come up with Stokfella. It's an app that digitizes the stokvel industry. And he's raised over R1 million for his project, and he's now offering banking services too through his platform, which is very cool. And speaking of solutions targeted towards your younger consumers, we already know young people have a window into each other's wardrobes, into each other's bathrooms through social media, and now we're wanting to peek into each other's pockets too to see what we're spending. Refinery 29 set up a Money Diaries website and invited young women to diarize their spending. There was no taboo, they held nothing back. We even had entries chronicling their spending on cocaine and pot. So there really is no taboo. And banks and businesses can use this transparency and this information that's available and that consumers are willing to share to build targeted solutions for those people. Here's a great example. And that's it. Pretty much all these trends point to the fact that social networks, be they virtual or in person, are putting people in closer contact with their own money. Thanks. Events like this are important so that businesses and individuals can just keep their finger on the pulse of what's happening. The world is changing so fast. As they say at Singularity University in the US, The rate of change is exponential at the moment, and it's almost going to get to a vertical point in the curve where things are changing so rapidly that we just can't keep up unless we make a conscious effort to figure out what's going on around us and what's changing from day to day. At the moment, people's biggest concerns relate to artificial intelligence and where that leaves us as humans. So it's really, we're getting to the point of the real rise of the machines. We're seeing people turning into cyborgs with smart contact lenses and Fitbits that track their whereabouts, and even implantable chips, which we're seeing with chipping parties going on in the US and Sweden. And at the same time, we're seeing machines become smarter and smarter and smarter. We've just had Sophie, the robot that joked that she would destroy humanity, given citizenship in Saudi Arabia. So we're really seeing this like machines becoming more like men becoming more like machines. And where does that leave us in our role? Especially since so much of humanity has defined our value in life as through the work we do. And what happens when that work is replaced by a robot? What do we do to fulfill our lives, and how do we support our families? These are the questions that people are struggling with. But we can look 5 minutes ahead, and that's what we do as trained analysts and as futurists. We look ahead, just 5 minutes ahead of what's going on around us, just so that you can be the most prepared person in the room. Ultimately, none of us know what's going on 5 years from now, let alone 10 years from now or 50 years from now, but we can be prepared for tomorrow, and that's what our role is, to prepare you for tomorrow. Okay, when it comes to social finance, we're really talking about putting people back in control of their own money and back in control of their own transactions. Things like financial services players, your banks, your financial advisors, your stockbrokers have really just added distance and fat to the way we deal with our own money. So many people have no idea how their money is transacted, how to save it, how to spend it, or even what happens when they pay someone. And social finance is about putting that power back into the hands of the individual and letting us to transact with each other on our own terms. Well, it's about empowerment. It's about people understanding that they can make their own money, spend their own money, and transact without having to rely on a bank or a broker that's actually just taking money from them at the end of the day. Well, the fear is of the unknown, because if you don't understand the opportunities and the technology that's available to you, it can be quite overwhelming. Like, take Bitcoin. It's blown up this year. I mean, the profits people have made from it, the Bitcoin millionaires that are popping up everywhere, are quite extraordinary. But for the average man or woman on the street that doesn't understand how the system works, it can be quite intimidating, and worse, you could get suckered into trying to invest in the stuff when it's not actually an investment vehicle. It's a vehicle for facilitating trade. So this sort of knowledge gap is quite important, and the internet gives us the availability to get our hands onto all that information, but quite often we don't know what information to look for because there's so much of it. And that's once again where us trained analysts can help you pick out the bits that are important and the things that you should be focusing on for yourself. Well, it all starts with figuring out what you want to do, and then empowering yourself with the knowledge that you need to facilitate that. What digitization and apps and the internet have done for us is they've enabled us to be able to do all these functions that we previously relied on our banks for ourselves. So if you want to pay someone overseas, you need to then look at this from a different way, because you might have just gone to your bank. That could take days for that transaction to take place. Whereas there are vehicles like Bitcoin, like payment apps, that can enable you to do that within minutes and for a much lower cost. So it really comes down to what do you want to do with your money, and then figuring out the best way to do that, which is probably not the way you've done it before. Businesses that work in the financial services industry, that's accountants, bankers, lawyers, financial advisors, stockbrokers, all those role players and businesses that work in that space should be very worried about the social finance trend. Why? Because basically social finance, just like every other form of digital disruption, really boils down to an elimination and a squeeze on middlemen and the margins that middlemen have when it comes to transactions between themselves and their consumers. Social finance, things like banking bots and Bitcoin and all those other marvelous technologies, are really allowing consumers to transact amongst themselves without the need for a financial intermediary at all. So businesses really need to relook at themselves and relook at what solutions they're providing to their customers that the customers can't provide for themselves.